man stands alone in a dusty ravine outside the stone walls of Jerusalem. The wind picks up, he feels it against his face, and his heart sinks. Because of the wind, he knows the rule: he must step back. If you lived in this time, you would know the terror of this moment. He must retreat 100 cubits, almost half a football field away, from any human being who might be walking down the road. He pulls a torn piece of fabric over his upper lip. He opens his mouth and he screams, "Tame, tame, unclean, unclean." You have to understand the weight of that word. He has to do this every time he sees a shadow, every time he hears a footstep. He has to use his own voice to drive away the very people he desperately wants to hold. He is a leper. Under the law of his people, he is a walking corpse. He is not just sick, he is ritually impure, highly contagious. To touch him is to become him. If a clean person touches an unclean person, the clean person becomes unclean. The disease always wins, the impurity always spreads. That is the law of Leviticus. It makes perfect sense to you and me. A single drop of black ink will ruin a glass of pure water. But one afternoon, under the hot Judean sun, a teacher from Nazareth does the unthinkable. He looks at a man just like this one, a man who has spent years shouting at people to stay away. The man falls to his knees in the dirt. He begs, and the teacher does not step back. The teacher reaches out his hand, and he touches the walking corpse. This is not a story about a medical healing. This is not a story about breaking religious rules. This is not a story about a kind teacher feeling sorry for the poor. This is a story about a holiness so violent it kills the disease instead of catching it. For thousands of years, humanity lived under the absolute rule that sickness, sin, and brokenness were contagious. Today, you are going to look at 3 moments when Jesus completely inverted the laws of physics and spirituality. 3 times he stepped into the deepest, most terrifying impurity imaginable. And you will see exactly what happens when the pure water is so powerful it cleanses the ink. Before you can understand the miracle, you have to understand the horror of the law. In the ancient world, impurity was not just a metaphor for doing something wrong. It was a physical reality. It was a heavy, terrifying burden. The ancient Jewish rabbis compiled their oral traditions into a text called the Mishnah. They used it to explain the strict laws of Leviticus, and in it, they detailed exactly how this impurity worked. Imagine a thick, invisible cloud of radiation. The Mishnah stated that if a man with leprosy stood under a tree and you walked under the branches of that same tree, you were instantly contaminated. You did not even have to touch him, you just had to share his shade. The rabbis commanded that you had to stay at least 4 cubits away from an unclean person, about 6 feet. And if the wind was blowing, you had to stay 100 cubits away. Impurity was a predator. It was always hunting, always looking to spread. This was the terrifying reality for a man we read about in the first chapter of Mark. We do not know his name, we only know his condition. He was a leper. You have to imagine the absolute silence of this man's life. No one had shaken his hand in years. No one had patted him on the back. He had not embraced his wife or held his children since the day the priest looked at his skin and pronounced him dead to society. He lived in the dirt. He slept in the dirt. He was a ghost haunting the edges of a world he used to belong to. One day he sees a crowd gathering. He knows Jesus of Nazareth is somewhere in the center of it. And this man makes a desperate, reckless decision that could easily get him stoned to death. He stops shouting the warning. He stops retreating. He walks directly into the crowd. You can hear the panic, people screaming, mothers pulling their children away by the arm. A wide path clearing instantly in the dust as this walking contagion moves forward. The crowd shrinks back, terrified of the invisible radiation. The man falls on his face right at the feet of Jesus. He does not ask for a medical favor. He looks up and says, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." He is not just asking for clear skin. He is asking for his humanity back. He is asking for permission to sit at a table with human beings again. What happens next is recorded in Mark chapter 1, verse 41. It is a moment that should stop you in your tracks. The English translations usually say Jesus was moved with pity. But that phrase is too weak. The original Greek word used here is splenchnizomai. It is a harsh, guttural word. It means a violent, gut-wrenching tearing in the stomach. Jesus did not feel a polite religious sympathy. He looked at this broken, isolated man kneeling in the dirt, and he felt a physical pain in his own gut. So Jesus does the absolute last thing a holy rabbi should do. He reaches out his hand, and he touches the leper. He touches the radiation. In that split second, the crowd must have gasped in horror. According to every law they had ever been taught, Jesus of Nazareth was now defiled. The clean had touched the unclean. The black ink had just touched the pure water. Jesus was now legally contaminated. But Jesus speaks, "I am willing, be clean." And immediately the leprosy vanishes. The ancient law of contagion was just reversed. The sickness did not infect the healer. The healer infected the sickness. The pure water was so incredibly potent, so deeply holy, that it washed the ink entirely out of existence. For the first time in human history, holiness was contagious. Jesus did not have to touch him to heal him. He could have spoken a word from 20 feet away, and the man's skin would have been restored. But Jesus touched him anyway. Because before the man needed physical healing, he desperately needed to know he was not too dirty to be held. The ancient world believed a terrifying lie. They believed that brokenness was always stronger than wholeness. Jesus came to prove that the exact opposite is true. If you are starting to see these ancient biblical patterns in a new way, if seeing Jesus flip the rules of religion upside down is changing how you read Scripture, take just a second to subscribe to the channel. We uncover these hidden, deep layers of the Bible every single week, making them simple to understand. Now, let's return to that dusty road in Mark chapter 5, because what Jesus does next goes even deeper. We have seen what happens with a visible skin-deep impurity. But what happens when the uncleanness is not out in the open? What happens when it is a secret shame you have carried in your own body for 12 agonizing years? Imagine the sheer panic of walking through a massive shoving crowd, when you know that just brushing against someone makes them legally defiled. That is exactly what a woman in Mark chapter 5 is doing. She is terrified and she is exhausted. For 12 years, she has suffered from a bleeding condition. 12 years of waking up tired. 12 years of spending every penny she had on doctors who only made her worse. But the physical pain was only half of her nightmare. According to the 15th chapter of Leviticus, her condition made her perpetually unclean. Every bed she lay on became unclean. Every chair she sat on became unclean. Anyone who touched her, or touched something she had touched, was contaminated until evening. For 4,380 days, she has been an outcast in her own home. She is a walking source of infection. And right now, she is pushing her way through a dense crowd to get to Jesus. You have to understand the massive risk she is taking. Every time her shoulder brushes against a man in that crowd, she makes him ritually impure. If someone recognizes her and realizes what she is doing, a riot could break out. But desperation makes you brave. She says to herself, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." She is not asking for a conversation, she is stealing a miracle. She reaches through the wall of bodies. Her fingers brush the hem of his garment, and instantly the bleeding stops. She feels it in her body. 12 years of torment gone in a fraction of a second. She tries to slip back into the shadows, hoping to disappear with her stolen healing. But here is where it gets remarkable. Jesus stops walking. He turns around in the crushing crowd and asks, "Who touched my clothes?" His disciples think he has lost his mind. They tell him, "You see the people crowding against you, and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" They do not understand the physics of what just happened. When a clean person is touched by an unclean person, the clean person is supposed to feel defiled. But Jesus did not feel impurity enter him. He felt power go out of him. The radiation of her sickness hit the solid wall of his holiness, and his holiness won. The pure water rushed out and destroyed the ink. He looks around, searching the faces. The woman realizes she cannot hide. She comes forward, trembling with fear, and falls at his feet. She expects anger. She expects him to publicly shame her for making a holy rabbi unclean. Instead, he looks at this woman who has been treated like a toxic waste dump for a decade, and he gives her a title, daughter. It is the only time in all the recorded Gospels that Jesus calls a woman daughter. He does not just heal her body, he restores her identity. He tells her, "Your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." He proves once again that his purity is not fragile. It is aggressive. It seeks out the broken and the bleeding. But as powerful as this moment is, the stakes are about to escalate to a level that terrifies even the strongest believers. Because right after he calls this woman daughter, Jesus is going to face an impurity. That makes a bleeding condition look like a common cold. He is going to face the ultimate uncleanness, a corpse. Jairus was standing right there when the bleeding woman touched Jesus. He saw the whole thing happen. Jairus is a synagogue leader. His entire life, his career, his reputation revolves around knowing the strict laws of Leviticus. He knows exactly what makes a person clean and exactly what makes them unclean. But right now his theology does not matter, because his 12-year-old daughter is dying. He begs Jesus to come to his house. But while they are on the way, the worst news a father can ever hear arrives. Men from his house come and say, "Your daughter is dead." If a bleeding condition was a severe impurity, a corpse was the ultimate defilement. The ancient rabbis called a dead body the father of fathers of uncleanness. It was the highest possible level of contamination. If you touched a dead body, you were defiled for 7 days. You had to go through a rigorous, week-long purification ritual. You could not enter the temple. You were completely cut off from the presence of God. By the time Jesus arrives at the house, the professional mourners are already weeping and wailing loudly. The girl is gone. The room is filled with the heavy, suffocating presence of death. Jesus walks into that room. He steps right into the center of the ultimate impurity. And he does the unthinkable. He takes the dead girl by the hand, a holy rabbi, willingly grabbing the hand of a corpse. To anyone watching, Jesus has just permanently ruined his own purity. He has invited the shadow of death onto himself. But the uncleanness does not transfer to him. His life transfers to her. He speaks to her, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And she opens her eyes. She stands up. She walks. We live in a world that is terrified of contagion. We understand how viruses work. We know how quickly a sickness can spread from one person to an entire city. It is a basic, terrifying law of nature. If you drop a single drop of black ink into a glass of pure, crystal clear water, the entire glass is ruined. The ink spreads. The darkness always overtakes the light. The sickness always beats the health. But Jesus of Nazareth is a walking reversal of the laws of physics. He is a single drop of perfectly pure water falling into an ocean of black ink. And instead of the water turning black, the entire ocean turns crystal clear. His holiness is contagious. His purity is a force of nature. It does not run from the dark. It hunts the dark down and destroys it. Which brings us back to that dusty ravine outside Jerusalem. To the man with leprosy we met at the very beginning. The man who had spent years hiding his face, backing away from humanity and screaming, "Tame, unclean, unclean." He spent his entire life warning the world to stay away from his brokenness. When Jesus reached out his hand and touched that walking corpse in the dirt, the screaming finally stopped. For the first time in years, the ravine was quiet. The man did not have to run away anymore. The terrible, invisible radiation of his disease collided with the aggressive holiness of God, and the disease died. And instead of spending the rest of his life shouting, "Tame," that man got to walk straight into the temple. He got to stand before the priest, show his perfectly restored skin, and hear the word he thought he would never hear again. Tahor, clean, restored, brought back to life. There are 3 things you need to take away from these stories. First, the holiness of Jesus Christ is greater than any impurity this world can produce. He is not fragile. He does not catch your sin. Your brokenness cannot contaminate him. Second, you are never too far gone for him to reach out. It does not matter if your shame is public like the leper or hidden like the bleeding woman. It does not matter if you feel spiritually dead and completely cut off from God. You are never too dirty for the hands of Jesus. And third, Jesus does not stand at a safe distance and shout religious advice at you. He does not throw healing at you from across the room. He steps directly into your mud. He reaches right into the deepest, most painful, most shameful parts of your life, and he touches you there. Which of these encounters with Jesus changes how you see your own brokenness? Tell me below in the comments. Your impurity is not the end of your story, because the pure water has already entered the ink.